Jessica Evans fell in love with a boy suffering from mental illness. The day before her A-levels, she wanted to elope with him. For the sake of her future, I informed her parents about this plan. The boy, not finding her waiting, had an episode and killed someone. He was then committed to a mental hospital. Jessica hated me to the core for this, but pretended to love me and married me. After our wedding, she collaborated with my rival company, causing mine to collapse. She drove my parents into bankruptcy and even hired someone to run me over with a car. If I could go back in time, I wouldn't stop her. Instead, I'd encourage her to pursue true love. Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. I glanced at the empty seat in front of me. Jessica Evans had skipped the exam again today. It was the mock A-levels, and her absence meant her score would be 0. As expected, after the exam, Mr. Smith moved a student from the parallel class to our advanced class, effectively kicking Jessica out. After school, Jessica walked home with me as usual to avoid suspicion. I told her about what had happened. "Whatever," she shrugged. "I'm of age now. It's already too late to start going wild." I nodded and chimed in, "True, youth only comes once. We should boldly pursue true love." She paused, looking at me in surprise. "Neil, are you serious?" I nodded. "Of course I am. It wasn't my youth being ruined, so why should I care?" I looked at the streetlight nearby. This was where I had the car accident in my previous life. Although it was raining heavily that day, I still saw the driver's face. It was Hank Robinson's cousin. Hank Robinson, the true love Jessica was recklessly pursuing. "Not bad. I'm glad you've come to this realization. But..." She stopped walking and looked at me, a hint of displeasure in her eyes. "You haven't fallen for someone else, have you?" "Someone else." She instinctively covered her mouth, realizing she had misspoken. They say unrequited love is blatant and impossible to hide. How could Jessica not have noticed my feelings for her all these years? She was just playing dumb while enjoying my care and attention. But my wholehearted devotion not only failed to win her love but brought disaster upon my entire family. I could never forget the scene of my parents dying before my eyes. I couldn't forget Jessica's exaggerated, triumphant laugh. Her eyes held years of hatred for me, finally getting her revenge at that moment. "Neil, you got Hank committed to a mental hospital. You ruined his life. You brought this all on yourself." I shuddered. Jessica's words haunted me day and night like a ghost. How could I forget? I looked at her face. "Of course not. I don't have feelings for anyone." Her face finally broke into a smile again. "Don't worry. I won't fall for anyone until I've destroyed you. I've known Jessica Evans since we were children. Her parents both worked at my family's company, and we were classmates, so our families were quite close. A few years ago, Jessica's mother passed away, leaving her father to raise her alone. My mum started inviting her over for dinner regularly, buying her clothes and giving her gifts. I suppose that's when I started to fancy her. She was always so gentle and patient with everyone. I had many after-school classes, and she would wait outside for me, sometimes for an entire day. To say I fancied her might be an overstatement. It was more of an overdependence on her companionship. After all, even my own parents rarely spent that much time with me. Gradually, I realized I couldn't imagine life without Jessica. Just having her by my side made me feel at ease. I planned to confess my feelings after our A-levels, but something unexpected happened before then. Jessica fell for someone else, a lad from the nearby technical college. Hank Robinson. Though I didn't care for gossip, I knew of him. He was handsome, aggressive in fights, and his name was often heard on their school's disciplinary broadcasts, which sometimes reached our school. I never thought Jessica and I would have any connection to someone like that in our lives. One night, Jessica came to my house in tears. Her face was swollen, and she wouldn't stop crying or explain why, until I noticed the love bites on her neck. She said she and Hank were at her house when her father, who was supposed to be away on business, suddenly returned home. "You don't know how unreasonable my dad was. Hank has a condition and Dad just set him off. He's gone home to take his medication now." I quickly grasped the main point. So, he got physical with your dad? Jessica's expression changed. And it was only later that I learned from my parents that it wasn't just a simple scuffle. Mr. Evans was older, no match for Hank. It was more of a one-sided beating. Despite this, Jessica stood firmly by Hank's side. Love is the most difficult thing to force, so I decided to quietly step aside. But Jessica kept seeking me out, behaving intimately, making me think she had just been momentarily bewitched by a bad boy. So I kept trying to persuade her to return to her studies, attempting to save her. Before the A-levels, I discovered she was planning to elope with Hank. After much deliberation, I decided to tell Mr. Evans. After all, this was a life-changing decision for Jessica, and I didn't want her to go down the wrong path. On the day of the exam, Mr. Evans escorted Jessica to the test center. Hank waited on the roadside for a long time, until he was provoked by a passerby and stabbed the person to death with a fruit knife. He was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia and committed to a mental hospital. After that day, Jessica suddenly returned to my side. She became even gentler, more attentive, and kinder to me than before. I thought she had realized how dangerous Hank was and had a change of heart. Little did I know that for 5 years after our marriage, she had been planning her revenge against me. Finally, she succeeded. My company was crushed under the joint efforts of her and a rival company. My parents were driven to suicide. Even then, I never suspected her. It wasn't until I overheard her conversation with Hank's cousin that I learned the truth. My parents hadn't been driven to suicide. They had been pushed. She did all this to avenge Hank. She had hated me for so long because I told Mr. Evans about her plan to elope. She believed I was responsible for ruining Hank's life. But I had saved her, given her years of a comfortable life, always putting her first. She seemed to have forgotten all of that. I never imagined that the woman I had cherished for so long was actually a dangerous viper. Calling the police was my first thought. On the way to the station, a large lorry suddenly crashed into me. In my dying moments, through the rain-streaked windscreen, I saw the driver's face. It was Hank's cousin. I should have known. If she hated me so much, how could she let me live? Fortunately, heaven has given me another chance. Jessica, go ahead and love Hank to your heart's content. I'll pray for your love, wishing you a long and happy life together, forever and always. Jessica Evans answered her phone, grinning from ear to ear. Yes, yes, don't worry about it, she said cheerfully. I glanced at the time, knowing that tonight was when Hank Robinson would go to Jessica's house and be caught by her father. Sure enough, as soon as Jessica hung up, she said goodbye to me and left, still on her phone. Since things had come this far, I decided to make the situation even more interesting. After I got home, Mr. Smith, our head of year, called me. I agreed to his request. An hour later, Mr. Smith's car pulled up outside my house. He brought along Abe Patel, the deputy class representative known for his love of gossip. I had to admit, I was quite pleased with this turn of events. Jessica Evans is really a handful, Mr. Smith sighed, sounding disappointed. She used to have such good grades, and now look at the mess she's in. He was supposed to do a home visit tonight. There had been heavy rains recently, and many students' homes had been flooded. As a result, home visits were being arranged for day students. It wasn't necessary to rush it tonight, but since Jessica was rarely at home, I, as the class representative, naturally wanted to arrange it. Outside Jessica's building, I spotted Hank Robinson's old, battered motorbike. This is Jessica Evans' house, right? Mr. Smith asked. I nodded. After Jessica's mother passed away, her father had completely let loose, indulging in all the pleasures he'd denied himself in previous years. Otherwise, they could have moved to a better place. Now they lived in an old building that looked even more dilapidated after the recent downpour. Many residents had already moved out. Mr. Smith sighed again. This building is too dangerous. What if something happens? It's the flood season, after all. I remained silent. As we were about to enter, someone called out to me from behind. I turned to see Jessica's father standing there. His gaze fell on Mr. Smith. Isn't this Mr. Smith? What brings you here? Has Jessica gotten into trouble? Mr. Smith tried to cover up the situation. "Let's go inside to discuss this, shall we?" Of course, of course. "Please, come in," Jessica's father said, leading us up the stairs. The stairwell was dark, with no lift, and reeked of damp and mold. Abe covered his nose as we climbed. Jessica's father took out his keys. "This is our flat." As soon as the door opened, we all froze in shock. On the sofa was a couple, entangled in a passionate embrace, completely oblivious to our presence. Except for Mr. Smith, we all quickly turned our backs, though we could still hear the sounds even with our backs turned. Abe had an expression like he'd just discovered juicy gossip, and I could already sense his notorious mouth itching to spread the news. "Jessica Evans, you wretched girl. What on earth are you doing?" We couldn't see the expressions of the two on the sofa, but we heard the sound of someone falling. Mr. Smith coughed twice. We should probably call it a day here." Then he hastily led us downstairs. Once downstairs, Abe said he needed to buy something and gave me a look to stay behind as well. I also made up an excuse, watching Mr. Smith drive away. "Time for some drama," Abe said, expertly finding a spot and pulling me down to crouch beside him. "See that? They were in such a rush they didn't even close the curtains." Following his gaze, I saw Jessica being pulled by her hair and slapped by Mr. Evans, while Hank calmly got dressed nearby. Mr. Evans suddenly turned and started hitting Hank instead. "Dad, stop hitting him. I seduced him myself," Jessica cried, grabbing her father's waist. "Hit me instead, not him." The more she said this, the more Mr. Evans' anger seemed to grow. He shoved Jessica away and, catching Hank off guard, swung the feather duster hard against his bare upper body. Hank endured the first few blows, but gradually his expression became quite sinister, with a frightening ferocity in his eyes. He suddenly dodged the feather duster, throwing it far away, then viciously kicked Mr. Evans in the stomach. Mr. Evans, being smaller than him, was sent flying a couple of meters. Blimey, that's intense. He even hit his girlfriend's dad. I turned my head to see Abe had somehow produced a camera. "Isn't that a bit much?" I asked. Abe grinned. "Can't get clear shots on a mobile. Why are you even taking pictures of this?" He replied matter-of-factly, "To share the gossip, of course. How else do you think I maintain my popularity?" I was once again left speechless. Realizing he'd gone too far, Hank ran out without even putting on his shirt and rode off on his motorbike. He left behind Mr. Evans groaning in pain on the ground and Jessica in a state of panicked confusion. "Let's go," I said, tapping Abe's shoulder, but he didn't move. I decided to leave on my own. Sure enough, the next day at school, I saw a crowd gathered around Abe's desk. He was vividly describing last night's events, embellishing the story with great enthusiasm. When such scandals spread, it's always the girl who gets hurt the most. So the gossip revolved around themes like sweet, shy Jessica turns out to be a right slag, and Jessica Evans betrays her own father. As for Hank, this just added another juicy chapter to his already questionable reputation. Some even thought he was impressive for beating up his girlfriend's father, with the girlfriend still blindly devoted to him. When Jessica returned to school, she naturally heard all these rumors and whispers. Her former friends, to maintain their own good image, completely distanced themselves from her. Those who had always disliked her took this opportunity to make her life difficult in various ways. She was constantly subjected to abuse, curses, and mockery. I had warned her about the potential consequences long ago, but she had brushed it off, even accusing me of being jealous of Hank and exaggerating the risks. Returning home after school, Jessica's eyes were red, and her clothes were in disarray. "Why did you bring teachers to our house? Are you mental? Couldn't you have given us a heads up?" I took out my phone, showing her the many unanswered calls. She never answered my calls when she was with Hank, and that time was no exception. Jessica glared at me, unable to say a word. I smiled gently, patiently consoling her. "This is just heaven testing your love. You must believe that everything will pass. Love conquers all." Jessica's eyes instantly lit up, and she nodded vigorously. You're right. As long as Hank and I are together, there's nothing we can't overcome. She seemed to have made some sort of decision and headed off in the opposite direction from me. I heard from my parents that Uncle Evans was alone in the hospital with 2 broken ribs. Uncle Evans originally wanted to report it to the police, but Jessica threatened to kill herself, so he had to give in. Now his daughter has disappeared without a trace. In my previous life, I went to the hospital to take care of him and even paid for his medical expenses. I felt sorry for him being alone, and after all, he was Jessica's father. But this time, I did nothing. This had nothing to do with Jessica anymore. In my previous life, when I went bankrupt, Uncle Evans didn't hesitate to add fuel to the fire. He only had A levels and my parents were his classmates, which is why they arranged for him and his wife to join the company. They've been there for so many years. But in the end, all they got in return was his betrayal. If I hadn't seen him and his daughter, I wouldn't have known that ingratitude could be hereditary. He worked in the procurement department, where it was easiest to embezzle small amounts of money. For Jessica's sake, I had always chosen to turn a blind eye. When it rains, it pours. It was time for him to experience some hardship too. I compiled the evidence of Uncle Evan's corruption over the years into a file and sent it anonymously to my parents' email. They couldn't believe it at first, as Uncle Evans had always portrayed himself as an honest man. But after investigating, they found that the dirty deeds he had done in the company over the years were far more than what I had documented. In the end, they went to the hospital personally to tell Uncle Evans that he didn't need to come back to the company. As for the money he owed the company, they decided not to pursue it. Uncle Evans wasn't grateful for this. He was even cursing as my parents left. Such a person deserved to be trampled into the mud. On Monday, when classes resumed, Jessica came to find me, which was rare. Her face and neck were covered in bruises, and her wrists were badly bruised too. Neil, I never thought Hank would actually hurt me, she said. She lifted her skirt, revealing even more severe injuries on her legs. I pretended to be concerned. You should go to the hospital. No. She immediately stopped me. What if the doctor reports it to the police? I can't send Hank to prison. I put away my phone. I see. She covered her face and began to cry. I don't know what to do. He said he would never hurt me even if he hurt the whole world. Yesterday, the way he looked, I really thought he was going to kill me. Why did he hurt you? I asked. Jessica said it was because of what happened to Uncle Evans, and Hank was still angry about it. I patted her back. Don't be like this. He's just ill. Jessica looked up at me weakly. Should I forgive him? I shrugged. That's up to you. But I think Hank is quite pitiful. He must be in a lot of pain now, having hurt the person he loves when he couldn't control himself. Jessica's eyes flickered, clearly moved by my words. I continued, if the only person who loves him leaves him at this time, I'm afraid he won't have the courage to go on living. She looked worried. Really? You always say that love can cure all ailments. If you're willing to invest time and effort, I believe no one can resist being moved by you. In her previous life, Jessica had gotten closer to Hank despite the whole world's opposition. Now that no one was controlling her anymore, she actually had thoughts of breaking up with him. I have to say, this idea of hers took me by surprise. Jessica was once again immersed in self-pity and strengthened her resolve. I sighed. But it's not good for Hank and Uncle Evans to keep being at odds like this. Her eyes lit up when she heard my words. Do you have an idea? No, I said, and seeing her disappointed expression, I continued, I think you need to bring Uncle Evans into Hank's camp, make him dependent on Hank. Then would he still oppose your relationship? Jessica frowned slightly. Dependent on Hank? But there's nothing. Her words suddenly stopped, as if she had thought of something. Yes, Jessica, it's him. You should have thought of it earlier. One of the murderers who killed me in my previous life, Hank's cousin, Abe Patel. He's currently a bouncer at a small gambling den, and he's in need of a big client to turn into a regular. Jessica Evans had been missing for several days, and the school finally lost patience, expelling her outright. When I informed Jessica of this news, She didn't seem particularly upset. Instead, she appeared to feel a sense of relief. "Are you happy about this?" I asked. She nodded cheerfully. "Your method really worked. My dad absolutely adores Hank now. He's even moved into our house." "Is that so? Well, congratulations then." Her face beamed with happiness as she told me they had moved to a bigger house. Her father had won some money gambling. Though they hadn't bought the house, at least they weren't living in a council flat anymore. "What are you planning to do with your old house?" I inquired. Jessica replied, "We're selling it. Dad says he'll give the money to Hank to start a small business." A few days later, the Evans' old house was sold. A. Patel's boss bought it. Shortly after the purchase, news spread that the area was slated for redevelopment. I had arranged for this information to reach Abe's boss, who had then convinced Mr. Evans to lose heavily in a game, resulting in the acquisition of the house. When Mr. Evans heard this news, he broke down in tears, overcome with regret. Jessica, who had little concept of money, made some flippant remarks and received several slaps from her father for her insensitivity. Interestingly, Hank Robinson hadn't been home for days. Now that he had money, he was out partying with a questionable crowd every night, and the women by his side were no longer familiar faces. As a longtime friend, I felt obligated to inform Jessica of this development. Upon hearing the news, she rushed to the hotel, disheveled and enraged. As she burst through the door, she found Hank in a passionate embrace with another woman. Without a word, Jessica lunged at the woman, grabbing her hair. Surprisingly, Hank stepped in to protect the other woman, which only fueled Jessica's anger. The two women fought fiercely while Hank stood by, seemingly enjoying the spectacle. The altercation ended with Jessica emerging victorious. She was still elated by her triumph and the fact that Hank had agreed to return home with her. She seemed completely unaware that she had become the very type of shrew she once despised. However, this wasn't the outcome I had hoped for. If my idea of punishment was simply to turn her into the person she hated most, then my vengeance seemed far too lenient. What I truly desired was to push her to the brink, to make her suffer with full awareness of her situation. The A-levels were fast approaching, and as the top student in my year, I naturally had high expectations placed upon me. On the last day before the exam break, Jessica, Evans' form tutor, asked me to call her to collect her belongings. Jessica hadn't been to school since her expulsion. I rang her, expecting a refusal, but to my surprise, she agreed readily. Half an hour later, we had nearly finished tidying the classroom when someone called my name from the doorway. I turned to see Jessica, heavily made up and wearing a tight strappy dress, standing at the entrance. "I'm here for my things. Hank insisted on coming with me," she said. I glanced sideways and saw Hank Robinson. He was looking at me too, and when our eyes met, he suddenly smirked disdainfully. "I hear you're quite the scholar?" "I do all right," I replied. He rolled his eyes. "I can't stand you hypocritical types. Good is good, bad is bad. What does all right even mean?" I smiled without responding, but some of my classmates couldn't bear it and came to my defense. "Neil's top of the year. He'll be off to the best university, while some people will never catch up." Hank laughed even louder, the contempt in his eyes growing more evident. "Studying? If studying made money, would there be any poor people in this world?" He pulled out the keys to his Mercedes, dangling them in his hand. I'd heard it was a second-hand car he'd bought a few days ago. Jessica was basking in his reflected glory, not considering where he'd got the money for the car. I coughed lightly. "There's no point arguing about this. We'll all understand eventually." Jessica and Hank paraded through the school corridors, even taking a turn around the staff room. The teachers did their best to be polite, but their eyes were full of regret. She had once been part of the top set, after all. No one had imagined how simple and quick it could be for a person to fall, catching everyone off guard. But they didn't see it that way. They thought they'd won. While we were still in school, unaware of the harshness of the real world, they'd taken their knocks and considered it growth, a source of pride. They kept flaunting it to us, trying to see envy in our eyes. But once they got the attention, they left satisfied. They didn't care whether the looks they received were truly envious or if people were just gawking at them like circus animals. The A-levels ended, and my results were good enough to get me into my preferred university. In my previous life, I'd been so preoccupied with Jessica's situation that my exam results hadn't been as good as they were this time. My parents were overjoyed and wanted to throw a party to celebrate my university acceptance. They didn't invite Jessica's family and deliberately kept me at a distance from her. After the party, Jessica's father came over on his own. He brought me a book as a gift, wishing me well in my studies. Then he kept peering inside, finally unable to resist asking, "Are your parents well?" "They're fine," I replied. He coughed awkwardly. "Neil, you know I've watched you grow up. Could you put in a good word for me? Ask your parents to let me come back to work?" Instead of agreeing, I asked, "Are you in need of money?" He was too embarrassed to admit to his gambling, only saying that the family needed money and had sold their house. "I saw Hank bought a Mercedes. I thought you were doing well, not short of money." Jessica's father's face changed. "What did you say? A Mercedes?" "He bought a Mercedes." I suddenly panicked. "You didn't know?" I shouldn't have said anything. Please forget I mentioned it. But Jessica's father couldn't hear anything else now. "Although it might be that Hank borrowed it from his cousin, Abe Patel," I added. Jessica's father's face turned ashen. "Abe Patel is Hank's cousin?" "Yes. Didn't you know?" Jessica's father clenched his fists, his teeth grinding audibly. Without another word, he rushed back home. I watched his retreating figure and tossed the book, How to Be Richard Branson, into the bin. After Mr. Evans returned home, he investigated the relationship between Hank Robinson and Abe Patel. It turned out they were indeed cousins, as genuine as they come. The house he had sold, along with the money lost at the casino during this time, were all part of Hank Robinson and Abe Patel's machinations. They had even received a substantial commission from these dealings. This explained how Hank could afford to buy a second-hand Mercedes, while Abe had managed to pay the deposit on a house. To Mr. Evans' shock, Jessica was aware of all of this. The revelation nearly caused Mr. Evans to faint, but he still went to the casino to make a scene. In the end, he was beaten half to death by the security guards and thrown out. All the security guards were following Abe's orders. Jessica watched her father being beaten so severely while her boyfriend sat inside, drinking and turning a blind eye to it all. She tried to rush in to confront them but was pushed down by security, causing her to miscarry. No one knew she was pregnant, not even herself. Father and daughter lay together, blood pooling around them. Hank Robinson saw it all from inside but didn't move a muscle. Jessica groaned in pain, whispering Hank's name before finally losing consciousness. At the hospital, it became clear that Mr. Evans' leg couldn't be saved. He would be confined to a wheelchair from now on. Jessica's condition wasn't good either. It would be very difficult for her to have children in the future. When I arrived, father and daughter were sobbing in each other's arms. They looked at me as if I were their last hope. "Neil, what should I do? I can't believe Hank would do this to me," Jessica cried. Mr. Evans slapped her hard on the back. "After all he's done to you, you're still defending him? Are you daft?" Jessica bit her lip and wept. "Hank wouldn't do this to me. He said I was the only light in his life, his only hope. How could he possibly treat me like this?" I nodded, agreeing with her words. "Hank isn't inherently bad. I think he might have been manipulated by someone." Jessica looked up at me thoughtfully. "Manipulated by someone?" "Yes," I said. I helped her sit up. "Think carefully. Who has he been close to recently?" Before Jessica could answer, Mr. Evans jumped in. "I know. It must be Abe. He had his eye on our house because of the upcoming demolition. That's why he tricked you two dimwits into getting me to gamble." Jessica finally understood. She grabbed my hand. "What should we do? Could Hank be in danger?" Mr. Evans lay back on the bed, breathing heavily, overcome with anger. I leaned in to tell Jessica, "Actually, it's simple to help Hank. Find evidence of Abe's crimes and have him sent to prison. Then Hank will be free." My words were a revelation to Jessica, and she nodded in agreement. I left after dropping off some fruit. Abe had been involved in quite a few illegal activities over the years, but he was such a small-time crook that investigations never led back to him. People like that often aren't very meticulous in covering their tracks. Jessica reconciled with Hank, and Mr. Evans even promised to buy them a house when they got married. He claimed it was money Jessica's mother had left when she passed away, a fixed-term deposit that was about to mature. This prospect was very appealing to Hank, so under Abe's instructions, he stopped his carousing and played the role of the perfect husband-to-be. When Jessica came to see me, she said she wanted to borrow some money, around £1,000. She was evasive about the reason, but I lent her the money anyway. As soon as she left, I received a call from one of Hank's mates. Hank's beaten someone up. He needs money to sort it out. He's lost it again. I nodded, remembering the fresh bruises I'd noticed on Jessica's hands earlier. True love indeed. He'd hit her more than once, yet she still chose to stay by his side. This was good, it saved me some trouble. Hank was very touched when he received the money and said he wanted to marry Jessica. Jessica was a few years older than me and had just reached marriageable age. Hank, having been held back in school several times, was much older than his classmates. Mr. Evans didn't approve. He had only wanted to bring down Abe for revenge, not to actually marry off his daughter. But it was too late. The couple had already stolen their household registration book and gone to the register office to get married. By the time Mr. Evans tried to intervene, they had already announced it on Facebook. Love can heal everything and comfort all wounds. I commented below, "Congratulations. May you have a long and happy life together." For love, Jessica became a warrior. She really did find evidence of Abe's crimes. A few years ago, when Abe had just started working as a bouncer here, he accidentally killed someone. His boss had helped cover it up. That's why he had been content to work as a lowly security guard all these years without complaint. In truth, he didn't dare complain. After finding the evidence, Jessica rushed to the police station. The police were shocked by the thick stack of evidence she presented. Abe was arrested that night, and his boss's casino was also raided. The casino owner was arrested, but his underlings were still at large. It didn't take much investigation to figure out who had informed on them. Jessica was Hank's wife, so they naturally took out all their anger on him. One morning as I was returning home, I vaguely saw someone in the bushes. Before I could get closer, he darted out. "Neil, please help me." Hank had come to me for help. How interesting. Help with what? How can I help? He swallowed hard, seemingly struggling to find the right words. After a moment's hesitation, he finally spoke. "I've gotten myself into a bit of trouble recently. I've been thinking, and your place seems the safest option. Could I stay for a few days?" I considered it for a moment. "I suppose that would be all right, but isn't it a bit late for that?" He looked at me, puzzled and somewhat displeased. I pointed behind him. "It seems your friends have already come looking for you." As he turned, his body shot out like an arrow, with a group of burly men in hot pursuit. I hung up the phone. Hank's little lackey had certainly proved useful. Hank didn't get far before he was caught. I dialed Jessica's number. "I'm not sure what's happened, but Hank's just been chased out by a group of men. I think they were heading towards Lake Serenity." "You should." Before I could finish, Jessica anxiously hung up the phone. That night, the police were called. Jessica clung tightly to Hank, shielding him, which resulted in multiple fractures to her own body. Hank, on the other hand, only suffered minor injuries. Not long after being discharged, Jessica was back in the hospital. This time was different. With her father disabled and unable to care for himself, there was no one to look after her. She had to hire a low-cost carer. The carer had a poor attitude and an even worse temper. When I arrived, she was feeding Jessica some porridge, spilling it all over her and the bed. Seeing me enter, the carer abruptly collected the food and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. "Neil, you're here," Jessica said, tears immediately streaming down her face. I glanced around the hospital room and asked, "Where's Hank?" At this question, Jessica cried even harder. That bastard is out there living it up with my father's money, sleeping with other women. He's even posting about it on Facebook. Does he think I'm dead or something? I sighed. Wasn't he supposed to be the only light in your life? How could he treat you like this? Jessica paused, then gave a bitter laugh. Yeah, I never thought I'd be fooled for so long. When mentioning Hank, she actually stopped crying, as if she had already shed all her tears for this man. Being deceived is indeed painful. Hearing my murmur, Jessica looked up at me curiously. Were you deceived? By a woman? Yes. I stood up. But I've already made her pay for it. Jessica stared at me intently, as if something had occurred to her, but she quickly dismissed the thought. I only offered some words of comfort before preparing to leave, but she hastily grabbed my hand. Neil, don't go. She bit her lip, trying her best to appear pitiful. Actually, I know you've always liked me. Let's give each other another chance. Okay? Suppressing a smile, I asked her, are you saying you want to be with me? She nodded vigorously. Yes, I'll divorce that bastard Hank, and then we can be together openly. But before that, I'm afraid you'll have to put up with a bit of inconvenience. So she wanted me to be the other man? She really didn't want to lose out on anything. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Perhaps the mockery on my face was too obvious, as Jessica's expression changed instantly. Are you laughing at me? What kind of misguided perception do you have of yourself to think that I would want to be with you? Jessica's face turned ugly. Her fists clenched as she glared at me angrily. I admit I liked you before, but now you're nothing to me. You're lying, you still like me. Jessica got so agitated that her wound reopened, but she ignored the pain and tried to embrace me. I dodged her, causing her to fall heavily to the ground. All I know is that I stopped liking you long ago, and moreover, I slowly crouched down, leaning close to her ear. I also know that your husband Hank won't let you off easily for this heartfelt confession to me just now. With that, I held up my phone, still on the call screen with Hank. Hank's seething voice came through the phone. You damn! Just you wait. Jessica's face changed dramatically. Her eyes filled with terror, her body trembling uncontrollably. I stood up. Jessica, I'm about to start university soon. The one we had planned to attend together. She stared at me blankly, her eyes vacant. Congratulations to us both. We've each got what we wanted. No, I know I was wrong. Neil, please help me one more time for old time's sake. I'm begging you. Just help me once more. Thinking of all the hardships of my past life, my heart was instantly wrapped in coldness, and my words came out devoid of any warmth. You're not worth it. I finally made it to the university I had longed for, officially embarking on a new chapter in my life. After graduation, I stayed in the city to start my own business. With the memories from my previous life, everything went smoothly. A few years later, I proposed to my girlfriend. We met each other's parents and then got married. She was strong-willed, had a clear sense of right and wrong, and was a kind-hearted woman. Being with her made me understand the true meaning of love. Occasionally, I would hear about Jessica Evans from my parents. She had struggled to conceive another child, but Hank Robinson, in a drunken state, had caused her to miscarry. Hank often physically abused her, but because he had a certificate of mental illness, he always escaped punishment. Jessica's love couldn't cure his illness. Instead, it pushed her into an abyss. Abe Patel was sentenced to death, which was carried out during my third year at university. Jessica's father lived in Hank's old house, watching helplessly as his daughter was beaten every day, not daring to say a word. He knew very well that if he spoke up, Hank would throw him and his wheelchair out onto the street. They had chosen their lives according to their own wishes, but it seemed they were living quite miserably. However, all of this had nothing to do with me. My wife was pregnant and I became busy, unable to spare any energy to pay attention to those uninteresting people and their tedious affairs.